afternoon, because the sun is up, right? Let's call to order this committee of the whole for the City of Highland Park, Illinois City Council, March 11th, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Ross.
Present.
Councilmember Hubler. Councilmember Tapia.
Present.
Councilmember Littler.
Here.
Councilmember Stone.
Here.
Councilmember Bloomberg.
Here.
Mayor Rohrig.
Here, we have a quorum. We send Councilmember Huber our best for a speedy recovery. I am seeking a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole from February 26, 2024.
I move to approve as amended. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. Scheduled business. Let's talk food and beverage.
Yes. You can come up with me, it's okay. Thank you, Mayor, council members. We have a presentation this evening that provides a overview of a new proposed incentive for the city's consideration. So we're looking for your policy feedback this evening. I just want to recognize Erin Jason, who is one of our assistant city managers. She oversees the business development division, among other responsibilities, and then Carolyn Hirsch, our business development manager, is going to be guiding us through the proposed incentive. What we are going to provide to you is just a snapshot of the various financial incentives that are currently available for the city, that we work with new businesses as well as existing businesses to offer them incentives for improvements to their properties. And then this possible program is an additional incentive program for consideration. So subject to your policy discussion this evening, we will go back and formalize this program and then bring it back to you just for your information, making sure that we've captured all of your policy feedback, and then continue to work with our existing businesses as well as brokers and lenders and other representatives that we partner with on an ongoing basis as part of our business development strategy. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carolyn.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, staff is seeking feedback. Oh, here we go. Haven't done this in a while. Staff is seeking feedback from the City Council regarding the proposed food and beverage incentive program to provide financial assistance to existing and new retail sales tax generating food and beverage operators to help cover costs associated with opening, expanding, or updating sites. We're also seeking your input on the program structure of a business grant, low interest rate loan, or both. The interior improvement program complements the exterior improvement program. We did not combine these programs as the exterior grant is available to a broader range of businesses. In contrast, the interior improvement program is only available to restaurants and other food and beverage businesses where food is brought to the table by waitstaff or food runners. The city offers new and existing businesses and property owners monetary incentives and non-monetary support to demonstrate its commitment to the community's economic vitality. Those include sales tax sharing, exterior grant improvements, the boutique incentive, and other monetary support. Staff reviewed the incentive programs of a number of communities and their program eligibility, criteria, structure, and process. We are proposing that this public-private joint venture, we're proposing this public-private joint venture because opening a restaurant or a food and beverage business can be quite costly with interior and exterior improvements, whether the space is second generation, antiquated, or white box. It is intended to encourage property owners to invest in their property and lease to desired restaurant operators and other food and drink businesses. It's also intended to inspire reinvestment and growth in Highland Park and stimulate employment.
And if I could just emphasize one point. So again, this is a public-private venture for really all of our incentives. So when we look at the exterior grant program that we talked about a couple of months ago, that's a 50-50 cost share. It requires the business as well as the city as joint ventures towards improvement of the property. This is a similar endeavor in that regard.
Based on business and property owner feedback, the cost of improving property conditions and building out space for a restaurant is a significant barrier to opening a business. The Food and Beverage Interior Improvement Incentive Program can address this barrier for restaurant and food and drink operators and encourage reinvestment and new investment in the community and support placemaking in business districts through strong food and beverage operators. The incentive would be offered to existing and new sales tax generating restaurant and food and beverage businesses. And I want to clarify that the program is open to sit-down restaurants and food and beverage business operators offering table service, which means the food is brought to the table by waitstaff or food runners. Self-service would not be eligible. Applicants must have at least 3 years of experience owning and operating restaurants within or outside of Highland Park. A sit-down restaurant must have a minimum gross annual sales of $1.2 million for at least 3 years. A food and drink business must have a minimum of $600,000 in annual sales revenue for at least 3 years. An executed lease for or including a first floor commercial space on a public street or for a term of at least 5 years is also required. The majority of the business's revenue must be derived from the retail sale of food and drink to the public, and it must be, again, no less than $1.2 million annually for sit-down restaurant operators and $600,000 annually for food and beverage operators. And the business and property owner must contribute equally, an investment equal to the city's.
I have a quick question, because I'm getting confused. So, first it was, okay, so sit-down is one category with a
Yes.
wait staff. Food and beverage, where you pick it up at the counter and bring it to your table, is a different category? Or
So you do not bring it to the table yourself. You could go to the counter, like Michael's, you know, you
Because
go to
I'm
the
literally
counter.
sitting here going, Michael's,
Right.
you know, so.
Perfect example. So you go to the counter, you order, and then they bring you the food to your table. It's not self-service.
Okay.
So, and that requires more staffing.
And
No.
what about backyard grill that,
That's exactly the second one.
you know, like, so, backyard grill, you do get the tray, right? Is that enough,
I
don't
thought they
you?
brought it to your
No,
table.
you order, you
No,
get your
you
number,
get-
you sit down,
And
and
then
they call
they-
your
okay.
number and you come back and get it.
Oh.
That's
But they're
exactly.
also doing table service, meaning cleaning the tables and maintaining the restaurant in that regard.
Okay.
So we can clarify that. more
And is that
specifically.
basically based on what kind of sales tax revenue is being generated
Yes.
versus McDonald's?
Well, not sales tax revenue, but sales revenue.
So food and beverage
Yes.
related tax revenue?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
he,
Whoops.
sorry. if I
Go
may.
ahead, no. That's fine.
If you can go back to just one, the criteria, Carolyn, on that last slide. So, I mean, it's a good question to be like, how did you even come up with, you know, these different criteria? So, we've done some preliminary feedback with our current restaurants, just to get a framework and their feedback pertaining to this program. And on an ongoing basis, we're hearing from them in terms of, you know, their needs and interests and growth plans and so forth. We also have access to Illinois Department of Revenue information that businesses provide to the state. And so when we take a look at different types of establishments that we have in our community and, you know, like an average gross sales, generally this is a reasonable number. This 1.2 million is a reasonable number for these types of restaurants, whether they have, if they don't have like a dinner service, you know, with alcohol sales, let's say they're just even breakfast, lunch establishments, this is still a fair number in terms of gross sales that they're generating. And then we felt like, again, because this is criteria, we want to make sure that, you know, this is not a, you know, I'm a city manager today and tomorrow I think I want to open up a restaurant, you know. This isn't for those types. I'm not doing it, it's hard work, I realize. But this isn't for those types of endeavors. So we wanted to establish criteria to make sure that we are really targeting those businesses that have experience, that are doing well, and that are just looking for additional support as part of their growth and expansion plans.
Mayor,
Yes.
to the mayor's point, and you said we'd clarify, I just want to understand what clarify means. So if, like a backyard grill, where in fact they do come, but they do clean the tables, whether, I would want to see it erring on the face of a little bit more
Okay.
leeway in terms of what table service means.
And we would define it.
Assuming that
Yeah.
the sales and the longevity of the business have been proven and they meet all that criteria, to the mayor's point, I would like to err that way in terms of what table service means. Because as soon as I saw this, my first thought was, I go up and I get my own, but that I view it that they're cleaning my table or that they're serving me, I guess.
Right.
Right, we would define it, we'd have
Yeah.
a specific.
Okay.
Sure. As you know, this program involves loan grant options, and an eligible sit-down restaurant operator could apply for a loan for 50% of the project cost, up to $100,000. Eligible food and drink operators could apply for a loan for 50% of their project cost, up to $50,000. An additional 10% could be made available for businesses making sustainable improvements as defined by the city. A grant loan may be combined for a total incentive of $100,000.
Kim?
Do you want
that
discussion
okay if
as we
we-
go along,
Or
or?
how do you
Well,
want
we're
to?
looking for, we've got slides at the end that specifically ask for your policy feedback on specific things, but if you have questions, certainly we'll entertain them, but in terms of your feedback, perhaps if we could just wait to go through the presentation. If
There was
that's
some
okay.
overall feedback, but
So let
not
me tell you
questions.
what my feedback is on, and you can tell me if you want me to wait. It's on the sustainable improvement portion.
Yeah, that will
Is
come
that
at the
at
end,
That's later.
because we want to
Okay.
get your policy feedback
We're
on the
good.
different criteria, different
Okay,
components of
keep
the
going.
program. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so that was the, so the loan could be could stand alone, or it could be a combination of the grant, again, maximum of $100,000. And for sit-down restaurant operators, and 50% of the project cost up to $50,000 for food and drink businesses. So in regard to the grant structure, the grant can be combined with, for a maximum incentive of $100,000 with, along with the loan. Maximum is still total of $100,000 for a sit-down restaurant. The grant award for an eligible food and drink business operator is $50,000 maximum, again, and payment would be made after the project is completed. Paid receipts are submitted to the city, and the city council approves the disbursement. You look like you have questions.
Information.
Sure.
So do you think that that distinguishing factor of the 100 and the 50, and I'm not saying those amounts, but the sit-down restaurants versus the food and drink business operators, maybe that does address those that are not the sit-down ones? And maybe we're just saying we'll do it at a smaller level in terms, if we were to adopt this? Does
Yeah,
that
we could
address
also
it?
further, but we could also further define, or,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to further define, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying
Absolutely.
maybe that does address it.
okay, all right,
Okay.
we'll brainstorm. Eligible improvements as a rule for this sort of incentive are those attached to the property and stay with the subsequent tenants. The proposed program includes professional fees and marketing as eligible expenses. Because tenant build-outs are so expensive, businesses often do not have sufficient funds for marketing. So we included that as well. Ineligible improvements would be any operating costs such as payroll, training, and anything that's not permanently affixed to the property.
Quick just question, where does furniture fit in that?
What is on the first one?
Furniture, I understand what you're saying. So we have furniture, fixtures, and equipment included. So no, that's not permanently attached, but it could be like booths and things like that, and we can further define that.
Do you want to?
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't really understand, and maybe we do this at the end, but why would painting be an improvement, but then go to the next one, and carpeting would not? I mean, if anything, carpeting seems to me like an upgrade, and painting seems like maintenance. And since I think of things that are eligible as upgrades, not maintenance, I think
Well,
we
if-
should go through this list
If you're
carefully.
a new business, it's not really maintenance. You're coming in and you're painting it to your brand colors.
If you're a new business, but if you're an existing business
Mm-hmm.
and you want to just do a little bit of a facelift, to me, that's on an expansion, and that's maintenance.
So let's talk about that at the end, but I agree with
Okay.
you. I mean, I kind of feel like carpeting, what's the difference between carpeting, wood, painting? It's all part of decor kind of a
Right.
thing.
Okay.
Thanks.
Oops. No, I'm missing a page, but that's okay. So, excuse me. So, tonight the council can consider whether they want to require applications to be submitted prior to businesses initiating the improvements, or if in certain case, if you want to grandfather in some applications to the beginning of the year, January 1, 2024, when the budget year started. You can consider that as well. So a retroactive application. Leases must be for the existing commercial space. Just deciding what I want to talk about here. Let's see. If this grant is awarded, a business would not be eligible for an exterior improvement grant for the same improvements. But they could layer it on because it's exterior. So you're working on different things.
You could do painting, carpeting, windows, and then also do an awning or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Applications or awards would be made first come, first served until the funds are depleted. And then preference would be given to businesses that meet the following criteria. They're filling a void in the community. They will be making maximum sales tax revenues. They create and retain jobs. And then they are rehabbing an existing building, an obsolete existing building, and then also using sustainable design. National establishments would not be eligible. However, you could consider a provision whereby they would be eligible if they're relocating within Highland Park.
Yes.
How do we determine if something is filling a void? I think that's sort of subjective.
So we do have, so from our database, we can see how many of each restaurant we have. We can compare them, whether they're sit down or fast food, quick pickup, and see if they're providing something that we don't already have.
Maybe the word unique, because, so for example, like Bordeaux is like that new Central European restaurant. And it's really, I mean, I didn't know what anything on the menu was, but I don't know that it's filling a void only, but maybe filling a void and unique, so that we could, if we have 15 hamburger joints and it's just another hamburger
That
joint.
factor is really only if we've depleted all funds and we've got 3 applications.
So
And
it's
we would come to you anyway. But the criteria that we have is not subjective. I mean, so we want to be very specific in terms of, do they meet these parameters in order to be eligible? That really, our recommendation is it should be yes, no.
Yeah.
To avoid
And I would
subjective.
be careful about trying to get too narrow
Right.
about that first one. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's a direction here that we would not want another, and I'll say it, another Mexican restaurant. That's just not going to fill a void or unique or whatever. But when it comes to other types of restaurants, there might be already in the restaurant that feels Central European or something, but because of the location or because of, the kind of service it is, or it might be like, oh yeah, that would qualify. So I think there's a subjectivity here, but I think we have discernment from staff and the city council to say, well, this is it requires a little bit of discussion, but I don't think we have to get too specific about what we mean by unique or void or whatever.
Well, there are 2 Eastern European restaurants in town now, so would we have said that the second one was not
Not
filling a
unique.
void,
That's my point. I don't
Right,
think.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
I mean, their
where's the
menus are
cutoff?
different.
Yeah.
So where's the
So-
cutoff?
That's what
But
I'm trying to
I
say.
think
We
you're,
just-
I think you're on a slippery slope, and I'm
yeah,
not
I see
happy
that.
with like, let's hold money, just because another pizza restaurant's opening or whatever the case may be. I think, there are other criteria that should come first, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'll be careful not to get too definitive about any of that part of it.
Well, if Rick Bayless wanted to come in and open a Mexican
But
restaurant,
they're
is that
national.
different?
Yeah, but that would be national.
Is it?
I don't know.
Why is it
I don't think
national?
so, I don't think
All right,
so.
we're- yeah.
Chicago.
Right, if it's a business that you feel is, you know, would be additive to the community, I can understand how it is a very slippery slope deciding
Right.
who can and who can't.
That should be,
I mean, at some
that
point,
needs to be clarified.
Sure.
Tony?
at some point, why is the city council and staff involving themselves in what are fundamentally market forces? There was a time when we had 3 or 4 cupcake
Oh
shops,
my God.
and while that seemed unreasonable, they were all being patronized, and they were
Right.
all making money until some of them or none of them were.
Yeah. Same with ice cream.
Mayor?
Yeah.
But I want to engage that, because that's an important issue. I believe in the market forces when there is not the city looking at being in a public-private partnership. In a private-public partnership, I think we have some interests in the game, because we're using some money from the public to make sure that it's not going to the third cupcake enterprise, but to one that we believe has a better chance of providing some vibrancy and something of value to the city. So that's a distinction I would make between pure market forces and one when there's private-public.
I want to respond to that.
Yeah.
There is no other option for the city to become involved in market forces unless it's in a public-private partnership. This is all fundamentally creating artificial commercial forces. And when we start looking at particulars of how a business is operated, what kind of business it is, I think that's really
Overreaching.
beyond our role and the role of our staff. That's my opinion. I understand what you've said, but I want to keep that in the mix.
Okay. Steve, you don't want to? No, okay.
Okay. The grant has a clawback clause if the business closes, whereby the grant must be paid back. The payback is on a sliding scale over 5 years. The property owner and tenant must agree that they will not remove the improvements for any reason without limitation for a period of 5 years after receiving the grant funds. If any improvements are removed for any reason, they must repay the entire grant award in full within 30 days.
And so what do you do if somebody's open for less than a year, goes bust, and we've given them gobs of money? How on earth do you claw that back? I'll take your car? I mean, seriously, that
What
seems to
about
be
a
like,
bond? We
Yeah.
do that with property development.
yeah, there might need to be like a secondary approach for some sort of risk neutralization, I think. Yeah, good suggestion, yes.
Yeah, I
And then
agree.
Yumi.
I agree. The 66% to me is a little, I'm not sure how you figured out the numbers. I would think that should be higher, like 75%.
I agree.
For 1 to 2 years, it just seems like it dropped down sort of precipitously.
That's what
Yumi?
I was going to say, that I think it should be 100, 80, 60, I mean, go down in 20 increments. of
20%
20.
increments?
Yeah,
Okay.
that is way too
Too quick?
generous, yeah.
Right, and I don't know what the depreciation standards are in terms of otherwise
Right.
using that as a metric. Yep.
I like Councilmember's suggestion of the bond, because frankly, I was gonna come in here and say, I really don't think that there should be, well, the grants portion I still have some concerns about. The loans I have no problem with, because I think it's a different situation, but this part of it does bother me. We're not talking about the kind of business that has the backing, that was why we had this distinction. So that makes me feel a little bit better.
Can I pose a quick question to everybody? And, you know, we've been sort of talking about this, and it only dawned on me today. You know, there are banks for loans, so why are we doing loans if there are banks for loans?
The loans are low
Very.
cost. Right
These are
now.
lowly.
No, I mean, I just wanted to get that out on the
Earlier
table.
in the year, I haven't looked recently, but it was 11% for a construction loan.
Okay,
So,
it's come down.
you know, we're talking 3%, but not 3%. So, you know, we're talking a low-cost loan, which makes it easier for the business to be able to pay back and also do business. So,
Right.
one of the benefits if a business goes out is that the equipment is there, another restaurant can move in. So, you know, those things do happen, but we're trying to minimize the risk going into it to, you know, make sure they've been in business long enough, have been successful, making enough revenue. So, my only concern.
Yumi has her hand up.
So my only concern about, and I don't disagree with a bond, we need to look into it, because my concern is holding the process up and making it less business friendly, but we're also talking about a lot of money, so.
Oh, absolutely. And especially given the amount potential at the beginning when things are most likely to go under, frankly, I think is something that we need to be.
Restaurants typically, I think 3 years is
Really?
their,
Okay,
they close within 3 years.
okay.
It's very frequent.
Um,
Yes, sorry.
The, oh, no problem. I don't know if bond is the answer. Some kind of, I assume some kind of collateral, and I don't know who's providing that collateral.
Right, and then
whether
who's
it's
holding it?
The
Well, the-
property owner or the business is providing it. In any event, the other piece I wanted to speak to about the loan is that, and I'm not an expert on this, some things are just common sense. An outright grant is income that they're paying taxes on. So if you give $100,000 grant, they're only realizing, half of that. And a loan could make more sense for, some businesses, I would think. And it could be why, a business that we spoke to recently declined, even, in any event, I think that should be factored in. That's why I think the 50 and 100,000, at least in terms of an outright grant, is way too low. They're realizing so little of it.
And Mayor, I'll just add, so
Yeah.
the loan, we would definitely do an agreement between the city and the parties. I mean, because that has to set forth very specific terms and conditions that the corporate authorities need to approve and the applicant as well.
Okay, who had their hand up over here? Yes, Julie?
But just on that agreement, unless it is secured with something, it's no better than a credit card debt, right? It's
Right.
not
Exactly,
secured debt,
yeah.
so we just have to make sure
Exactly.
that we go into that agreement with some type of security.
Right, right. Okay.
Okay. Applicants would be required to provide the information listed on the slide, so executed lease, schematics, cost estimates, and construction timeline, and a business plan. I'm going to pause here as we're seeking council's feedback on the interior improvement program policy, including the loan grant options, repurposing $500,000 of the boutique incentive budget to this program, a budget cap of $500,000.
Can I interrupt you just
Sure.
1 second, if I may just interject? So there are 2 slides of this policy feedback that we're requesting, so if we could maybe just go through each one, and then get your feedback. So the first one, the interior improvement program, there's a council member that asked, why are we just limiting it to interior? Understanding though, we do have the exterior as one. So I guess that's the first policy question. Do you want this limited to interior, understanding that the exterior program complements this? Or because it's a larger program, incentive program, do you want us to just have it improvement program? But again, they can't double dip. I mean, so they can't get the exterior grant and apply for this for the same improvement.
So before we even start on all of that, I just sort of want us to have sort of this top line of why are we having this conversation? Because we just sort of dove in, and I think it's important just to state for the public's purposes, we've been hearing from people for a while, we want more restaurants, and whenever we say, what businesses do you want in Highland Park? More than anything, it's more restaurants, more restaurants, more restaurants. But by the same token, for many, many years, there was sort of a sense on the council of, do we give money to property owners? This is their private property. If I think Tony needs a new living room, do I tell the citizens of Highland Park, Tony needs a new living room? He's come, it's like, where's the distinction? And obviously you're not generating revenue out of your living room, but, there's a point where you kind of go, yeah, right. Cocktails later. But in any case, so I just think it's one of those things where, why are we having this conversation? Because we know our neighboring communities have been putting together these sorts of programs to help incentivize other restaurants to come to their communities. So there's sort of this balance of using taxpayer dollars to benefit private businesses, to benefit private property owners, but also hearing that if we don't, we're going to continue to potentially miss out on some great businesses coming here because of the business incentives that are available in other communities. So I just sort of wanted to give that context versus we just decided last week that we just want to do this. I mean, I think there's more to it than that. So many hands are up, and I'll start with Andres, and then we'll just.
Well, to the point, because I know there's a philosophical thing about public money for private use. I like to think about it as as an ecosystem. So yes, it's public money, it's benefiting a restaurateur and the property owner, but then for what purposes? I see it as an investment to improve not only the overall infrastructure of our city, because there's places that are just running down or just can't keep up. Number two, to add vibrancy to the city that benefits the taxpayer, because we're adding the restaurants that they want, or helping add the restaurants that they want. And also, that brings us increased tax revenue as some of the successful restaurants find a way to expand, and we help them over the hump. Like, you know, the banks help us over the hump, you know, when we want to do an addition to our house and stuff like that. But you have an obligation to pay it back, right? So I believe that the philosophy here about are we using taxpayer money just to benefit private people? It's like, no, we're using public money to make an investment that has a return back to the public that entrusted us with that tax money to make wise use of it. Some of it is hard costs, some of it is a return on investment, program, so we can really increase the vitality of the city.
Right, thank you. Return on investment, absolutely. Annette?
So along those lines, it's sort of he said, she said, and I completely agree with Councilmember Tapia about the vibrancy and wanting to do that. But Mayor, I think that we brought this up in a prior council, so to be fair to Councilmember Ross, she wasn't here, but I clearly remember us having a discussion where we said we did not want to do infrastructure for property owners. And that was the philosophy. And one thing I would like to see better distinguished in this policy is property owners versus new and expanding businesses. In other words, the tenants. And the actual revenue that comes in, so it's not Tony's living room, but it is in fact whoever's got a business in Tony's living room. You know, and to me, that was a distinction that I could live with because it was a different thing. Now, I will say that philosophically, one of the things that does help all of this is when there's a contribution. And whether that contribution is matching funds from the tenant, and this goes to the grants, or the property owners, that makes me a little more comfortable. But otherwise, philosophically, I do have a problem with it because of the direction that this council had taken in the past.
Right.
So
Thank
that's
you.
sort of the overarching thing to your point.
Right, thank you. Yumi?
I have, a few things to bring up here. And have, some thoughts from reading the packet and whatnot. How, I guess, you've tried to explain how we've arrived at the numbers that we're offering as incentives. Was thinking that, have we looked at the overall picture? How many existing businesses in Highland Park would meet the 1.2 million threshold? How many meet the 600,000 threshold? What kind of analysis have we done of existing businesses here? Are the thresholds for revenue too low? Is there a reason, insult meant to businesses that are only generating 600,000, but do we want to invest in businesses that are only generating that much? I know a small but very successful one here that, generated 2.2 million in revenue. And I would also ask, we haven't tackled this, I greatly appreciate all restaurants in Highland Park. Have we looked at whether the economic incentives should be limited, at least in the beginning, to the Central Business District and Ravinia Business District? I know there are restaurants outside of them that could be interested in it, but, will we have a policy about that? And, I guess I'm a little fuzzy on how we determine which restaurants are, well, we're hearing projections from restaurant owners, but that are part of each of the proposals that we've seen. I'm guessing you have a good answer for this. How do we know they're realistic? I assume we can look at the sales tax numbers from any of the restaurants that they currently have. I'm almost done. Just throwing it out there, but I would like to love to see some higher end, prepared food emporiums like Foodstuffs come here. That would,
I've talked to them many a
you
time.
have. Me too. Can we aim for types of stores that we don't currently have here, so that they're not competing with existing businesses? The restaurants, that the food and beverage restaurants, I assume, would have to be objectively quite good. If the food isn't good, how is a grant or a loan changing their revenue?
Who's assessing if it's good or not?
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
well, there are some restaurants that I don't think an investment in beautifying the space is going to, change the revenue and what,
Right.
what's the, return on investment? And, why would we invest if there's no increase in sales or vitality? I'm just getting through all of this because I know you're diving into this and I'd rather give this
We want
now.
to hear all your comments, don't hesitate.
I already asked about the collateral we would require, but we need to look at this as a return on investment. This is a business undertaking, and we're investing taxpayer money.
Exactly.
I assume that we would be offering, I'm curious what interest rates we'd be offering if we're loaning. They'd have to be below market rates, or businesses could get them from banks, obviously.
Right.
And last one, I've spoken to a few times, certainly to the city manager and to the mayor, that we know that we're, I think at this point, trying to avoid incentivizing competing businesses to our existing businesses, at least to the extent that we can. And because we've heard such pushback from existing businesses, we've all received emails and whatnot about that. I did share that I think the numbers that we are discussing are too low. And I have too many questions.
No, you didn't. Please continue.
Have we talked to the businesses that we're recruiting? And I guess I'd like to ask staff if you could talk to the businesses that we recruit. I'm sorry, to the cities that those businesses are currently in, to ask, like if it's a local, if it's Winnetka or Wilmette or whatever, and we recruit somebody, a business from there, are they playing nice with, are they good neighbors to have? Are they working well with the city?
Oh, are the businesses?
Yeah, I would hope that would be one piece of what we're asking. And for the kind of a mishmash here, I've thrown in things as I've thought of them. If, in terms of the investment, and I hesitate to ask this, but, you know, do we look at the credit worthiness of some of these applicants? Are they, you know, do they have a good record? Is that something we can check with banks and whatnot about? I mean, these are ultimately financial questions.
Right.
And we're diving into that.
Right.
We have to
Back to
take
the whole
this,
point of we're being a bank.
Yeah,
and
we have to
there are,
take
like,
this
all kinds
very
of things in practice to
seriously.
protect a bank.
and I think it's just important, especially too, when we have the April 17th meeting, right? I called it a town hall, you said it's not a town hall, but we've invited restaurant owners to it, to be able to, you know, explain and not in just general terms, but how we see the return on investment, how, you know, be very specific, I think, about what the city has to gain from this, why we're doing what we're doing. And, I'm sorry, that was it. It was long and a little bit rambling, but that's because I kept writing down.
No, it's great,
notes,
thank you.
I
And you
should-
raised a question for me, you know, what if rates drop? Do then we have to start refinancing? And who's doing all that administrative work in terms of, again, acting like a bank?
Well, I would think that there's going to be a big role for our finance department, because this is very,
Julie won't make eye contact with me right now.
I can address some points, Mayor, if you want. Several things, and thanks, Councilmember Ross. So we had a couple of slides in here in terms of the program purpose, and we can go back to that. And I think it's important as we talk about all of these, always going back to why do we have these programs, who are they intended for? Because I think that is absolutely critical. So as certainly you all know, we have a business development strategic plan that guides a number of different activities. One of them is business attraction, and as well as business retention. And so in that regard, we are regularly in communication with our restaurants, with other businesses, with prospective businesses. So we hear with regularity what is working, what concerns they have. And for business attraction, I will tell you, and Carolyn can confirm it, certainly, businesses are looking, always asking the city, what can you do? How can you help me? And so we do have different things like the exterior improvement grant, so that improvement to that is a worthwhile initiative that we're now able to promote. We talk about, we've made streamlining processes and improvements to our permit process. We have what we'll call like a concierge, or what do we call it? Whatever, you know, just different things in terms of being business friendly. So those are all these different types of initiatives in terms of what we are currently offering, as well as what we're hearing and what we're seeing other communities provide. This type of program is something that has been of interest by council members as well as by the public. As you know, last year we rolled out the boutique incentive, and that targets specifically businesses that we are seeking to attract. This is not available to any type of business that is just locating in the community. This program, what we're proposing is that this program be very similar to the exterior improvement grant, in that there is very specific criteria that have to be met in order to be considered. We would like to stay away from subjectivity. I think it hurts us more at the end if we have to say, I'm sorry, you're worthy of this, but you're not. You know, so we want to avoid that type, because I think that ends up doing us harm more as a community, as an organization, and just have it of, if you meet these criteria, you are eligible for this program. The other aspect is you talked about research in terms of like, how did we get at these numbers a little bit more? So we do have access to reports that businesses will file with the Illinois Department of Revenue, but we can't disclose that information. So I'm not comfortable saying X% of businesses are earning this amount. That is not information that we should be releasing through a confidentiality agreement we signed with the state. But we can tell you that based on feedback that we've heard from businesses, as well as information that we have looked at these are reasonable criteria that will make sure that businesses that are doing well would be then eligible for this to be able to continue to succeed here and do well. And then we have, after these slides, if you want, I mean, we put together some information about other municipal incentives. So if you want to see what other communities are doing, we have a couple of slides that we can share with you in that regard. The interest rate is 3%. And so that's what we're proposing for everybody. And because this program would be reviewed, we're recommending reviewing it in the fourth quarter. We'll be certainly providing you regular updates as well. And then we'll see if we don't anticipate interest rates are going to drop down that much by the end of the year, but that's where we're at right now.
So,
Yeah, then we revisit, exactly.
At that point,
Right.
so I guess the question that needs to be asked, and I kind of said it in jest, but how much staff time do you anticipate this taking? Because they're already booked.
Right, and so this is actually gonna fall on administration. Finance will support, but this is very similar to Carolyn processes the sales tax incentive to the large sales tax generators. We're already doing the exterior grant program. Yeah, so this is additional work. We just made an offer today to a new employee in a business development division. So we thank you for your approval on that new hire. So we will assess how this is going. We work all together well as a staff, and so it'll be all hands on deck. If we feel that it is too much and we need additional manpower, even people power, in order to contract someone out, then we can look at someone to do that work as well.
Okay. I know Kim had her hand up and Tony had his hand up, and then I think everybody else again wants to circle back, so.
About the particulars.
So I've got a bunch of just we're talking about, which is the interest rate. If the interest rate drops below a certain amount, I don't think we should get into refinancing things. I think people just need to go to a bank if that's a better deal for them than the city. And in terms of needing another person, I think we need to kind of keep in mind what the value is to the city, what the sales tax amount is that we're generating because of these programs, and how much of that we want to spend in administering the program, so that we make sure that we actually come out ahead. The 50-50 cost share is excellent. I think that should be true of all of our grant programs for businesses. The national applicants relocating within Highland Park, I would not want to give grants to. I don't think that those are a draw. People can go to those businesses anywhere. And in terms of retroactive, I'm inclined to just have this going forward and not to look backwards. Businesses that have already done the work could somehow afford to already do it. So the sustainability, as I'm sure everyone guessed, I have some comments on that. All of these businesses should be meeting a certain threshold in terms of sustainability. And I think that we should probably come up with some guidelines for that. Some of the things that I came up with at a minimum are that HVAC improvements should meet certain efficiency requirements. This should be for conversion to all electric only, and lighting improvements to LEDs. And those may be some things that are sort of baseline that should be for all of the grant applicants to meet. And then that additional 10% for sustainable improvements would be for things that go above and beyond, like solar or EV charging. So to me, I think that there should be a certain threshold which is above the building code for sustainability as the baseline here. So that's
The
just
budget
my-
of $500,000, or did you address I know you said 50-50 cost share you support. The budget, we had suggested $500,000, if I can call you. So Councilmember Tapia and I spoke, and there is $1.5 million as part of incentives that we could dedicate as an overall budget for this. So if the council's interested, we could have that as the budget, but what we would suggest is that we certainly evaluate at no more than $500,000, just to make sure that it's working.
I would start with that and if we want to increase it, let's see how it's going before we do that. And the loan and grant options, I just would want to not make it any more complicated than we need to. So you asked about the interior program versus the exterior program. If we combined it in some way, if that made it easier for you to administer, then I would be open to that. I would want to do it in a way that's the simplest and that's the clearest for the businesses.
Keeping them separate would be easier.
Okay.
It's so much smaller scale and it includes non-restaurants.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Got it,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, Tony?
I'm gonna pass. I'm still listening to what's being said.
Okay,
Thanks.
Andres?
Yeah, so here I'll give sort of my overarching response to the proposal. First of all, I really believe in the shared responsibility concept that you brought forth. And even in earlier drafts, it wasn't quite a match, but in conversations, it's like, I see that you put a 50-50 cost structure. And I want to come back to the place of the property owner, to Councilmember Littleworth's point. But to look at this at a broad way, I like the combination of loan and grant, and it gives flexibility to the players to determine what is most advantageous to them. I like the fact that a loan holds them accountable to paying it back, so there's some safeguards there. And I think a matching grant also makes them accountable because, well, if you're going to ask for that money, you got to come up with the equivalent amount. So you got to think long and hard about, can I do it? And then also the amount I'm going to ask for, because the more I ask for, the more I'm going to have to put up. So I think that's a good check and balance, if you will. I'm just skipping some points here that were already made. I feel strongly that we should repurpose the entirety of one of the incentive plans that we had budgeted for, that City Manager Gita just referenced, but I want to give an explanation for it. First of all, I think we should fund it well. I mean, this is a stimulus plan, really, and it's a private-public approach, and we are doing a lot of things that we already have agreed to with Second Street and the furniture and things like that. And so we want to rev things up. We're coming out of hard economic times and COVID and all that, and there's momentum. I say just blow a wind on the sails. And there's a bigger macroeconomic here thing that we all experience. The Obama administration has now, with economists, they pretty much agree, not all of them, of course, but many of them, that his stimulus was just a little bit too short, and it prolonged the recovery by half a year or 8 months, whatever you count. And then when you look at the Biden stimulus, which was really supercharged, we are seeing the really positive results of that. So if we're going to do stimulus, then let's not do half stimulus or whatever. Let's just do it. And we had agreed already to a budgeted amount that is in the budget. So we're not even asking for more. So, and the second thing is, I think it's a good message to the restaurants that we're trying to be supportive of, that we are going to take one of the ones that we had earmarked for attracting one of the big ones and declare that we're going to move that bucket in to really address more restaurants that are already here that meet the criteria. And therefore, at 1.5 million, let's say we end up at 100,000, I'm going to advocate a little bit higher on the minimum. We can help half a dozen restaurants. And if that's that many that get in line and that meet the criteria, I think that would be fabulous for the city. So I would go for, let's blow the wind hard on this based on what we have budgeted for. I think that with the money, I think these numbers are a little bit low. I would recommend maybe 150,000 as the amount, and it could be reached through the combination that you talk about, or all of one or all of the other. So I would advocate for that. And I like the fact that you bifurcated. You said put more of that percentage toward the loan versus a grant, right? Did I read that right? Or it could be any combination. Could it be 50% loan, 50% grant? Or is there like a threshold for grant versus a threshold for loan?
It could be any combination, but no greater than
Right.
the 150, whatever the
Okay, so
maximum
any
is.
combination, okay, so I'm good with that. And then let the restaurateur or even the property owner, if they're involved, determine which is the most advantageous combination for them. And I think that the loan message is a good one as well, because not only do they have skin in the game for that, but it's a good way for them to say they're giving back to the city, as they should, there's obligation, so that more opportunities can be created for their peers as well. So I think that's a good shared community thing. I do believe we should have a grandfather clause for new restaurants in the process starting January 1, because this is a 2024 budget, and which began in January 1. Now we're sort of readjusting how we spend the money. But I think it's fair to say, look, anybody who got started after January 1 should be eligible for that. I don't see it, why we would cut it off because, you know, of the situation here. So I think, I'm sorry?
National.
Oh, the national, yes. I don't think national applicants should be helped, and I'll tell you why. As a guy who works with corporations that actually have those national branches and franchises, that's a corporate decision. If they want to move out of one location within that city of Highland Park to another for whatever economic reasons, well, they worked it out. I don't see why. That's a corporate decision versus the kinds of unique, you know, small business or even smaller restaurant groups that we're working with, that I think those are the ones that we have our eye on in terms of being able to help. I don't think we have to help the big national restaurants to relocate within our city.
Thank you.
And then, I'm sorry, did you answer the sustainable improvements?
Oh, for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As council members don't suggest?
I like that, making that distinction between the must-haves. Now, a lot of sustainable things should be, by default, you shouldn't get a prize for that. But if you go above and beyond that, okay, then we'll help you out.
Annette? Okay, you're sure that's okay? You don't want to? Okay, so what I'd like to do is go through these really quickly, and then I had a couple of little points, I just want to make sure we touch on them. I was actually the person who brought up the thing about the interior. Because this deals with restaurants and food and beverage alone, I kind of thought I'd like to keep it the maximum for them so that they can all go to one spot. And you know, if they wanted to do something specifically exterior, then they could go for that smaller amount too. So if it's best for council, for staff to keep the two funds separate, I have no problem with that, but I would keep this more open-ended in terms of the improvement program. So for example, you're doing a garden dining area, which really is just an extension of the dining area that you're improving and completely changing around. And so rather than coming for a separate grant for the matching 20 for the garden portion, you just put in the budget for the entire application for the one. And that's not, but you wouldn't be double dipping. And it's only specific to the restaurants. So I thought to take out that word, but frankly, it's not, I'm not dying on a sword over that one.
Okay.
But I just wanted to explain my reasoning for doing it in terms of that. The loan grant option, I'm very, very comfortable with the loan thing, although Councilmember Stone made a comment that I think could be taken into account. I think it's a huge thing to be able to give people a loan that's not 11%. I'm watching it as my kids struggle with mortgages or cars right now, and when you have that kind of a loan, it's just incredibly onerous. Versus if we have the capability with something that's collateral to give a much lower loan. But what I do think is a great idea is that if interest rates at banks fall down so that loans are attainable at 3% or less, I would say then at that point, it cancels out our need to have any need in that. And so I would put as part of the program that if we're looking at low interest loans, should bank loans fall to 3% or below, that we aren't in the business of giving a 0.5% loan. And so that's where I would do it, because we want to be of service. We don't need to be in competition with the banks. If they're down there, then we don't need to do this. But we want to provide a service to businesses that are trying to do it. And by the way, everything I'm saying, the two words that are key to me in anything we do are upgrades and expansion. I do not think this is a bailout or a maintenance program. And I want to be really clear on that in terms of our, philosophical. I like the way you started this meeting, because I think philosophically that should be in the preamble of this grant program. This is about expanding and upgrading, and we want to help businesses that are there now or new businesses coming in to do that. So that was one part. Budget, loans and grants. Okay, so loans I'm all in favor of. Grants I'm now comfortable with because of the shared responsibility, the 50-50. I love the fact that it mirrors the exterior program. I think we set precedent in a way by saying, here's a program we've already initiated, and this mirrors that in terms of what anybody has to do in terms of getting a grant. It also protects us somewhat because they're gonna have some skin in the game too. I'm not sure how I fall out on it in terms of owners, property owners versus tenants, and that's something I would love to hear more from my fellow council members on. Okay, budget cap, I agree with Council Member Tapia. I actually think we should go whole hog, and we've budgeted it for this year. I think it needs a strenuous evaluation come the end of the year to see how we're going on it. But I think it's important to really go into it with a hope of giving existing and new businesses the ability to really succeed, and more than just 2 or 3. And you know, some of the criticism that we came under, which I really don't care in terms of the big incentive we tried to do, but I want to make sure that our current businesses and new businesses that are smaller know how valued they are. And I think the way we show them how valued they are is to really go into this with a bigger budget. And we have budgeted for it. And if anything, we've taken that away from what would have been the large one. And because of that, I think we can make a real statement to our current business, restaurants and food and beverage that we are committed to them. Okay, table service, I think definitions are better. And so I would say, if it's gonna be like a $1 million, if it's a $1.5 million budget, then I would say up to 10%. So instead of it being 100,000 max, it would be 150, because that way, in a way, we're looking to 10 businesses that we could serve with this 2024 year. So there is some rationale to it. And similarly with food and beverage, instead of 50, it would be 75. So if there's some rationale, is all I'm saying, for why I'm coming up with these numbers. I love the 50-50 cost share. I love whatever Kim said about the sustainable. I'm in with that. That's easy. The retroactive applications, I think January 1. This is a 2024 program, and I don't want, just because we're getting to it in March, I don't feel we should penalize businesses that have either just begun or have signed up for May, but they've already got the terms together. So, you know, maybe they could still come to us for applications. So I think January 1 is as far retro as I'd go, but that's where I would go. I'm totally opposed to giving anything to national applicants, so I think it's a non-starter. Okay, that answers those quick comments that I had. Well, this had to do with the maximum sales revenue, so maybe we want to wait on that one. I mentioned the 3%. I mentioned the exterior. Sorry, but I wrote all over these things. Upgrades, mirroring. I'm good. That's
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Great. Yumi?
I'm good with the 10% additional for sustainable improvements. I'm also relatively good with the retroactive applications. Not in favor of the helping out national applicants. And I've already made my comments. I know that, you know, I understand and respect that I have colleagues who may not, you know, feel it's appropriate to, you know, be spending more of taxpayers' money. At the same time, I feel that what we're offering is maybe too low, and I would, you know, food and beverage, I mean, it's up to, right, up to 50. I mean, I would I'm gonna go even more than you, up to 100 for food and beverage, 200 for table service. I mean, I think it would depend on the applicant, right? And I already spoke to the is there anything more you needed to speak to
No.
the loan and grant? And
I just had you as having your hand up again, so
Oh,
I just
okay.
trying to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, again, since it's up to that cap, I could imagine the money easily spent on, upgrades and whatnot, and equipment, and, yeah.
Okay. Tony?
Thank you. I really appreciate all the comments. It probably won't be a surprise to anybody to hear that I'm not comfortable with the program overall. So I'll keep my comments brief because I think the general temperature in here is favorable to the program, and I think that the way it's been analyzed is reasonable. So very briefly, I'm not sure that we should be focusing on restaurants. I understand that's what a certain population in our community has a preference for, but restaurants are a relatively volatile and uncertain area of the retail industry. They're very uncertain, and that's one of the reasons that banks tend not to loan to restaurants. So we're putting our foot into, I think, dangerous economic water, and I had the same feeling about the program that we've already started. I also feel that the program is helping businesses that are already successful. And one of the complaints and one of the concerns that we've had in Highland Park is the loss of businesses. We've seen that both during the pandemic and post-pandemic, during the economic recovery for some. Businesses have failed for a variety of reasons. It seems to me that we are aiding competition without aiding people who are struggling. You know, it's typical of what happens when you go to a bank for a loan. You can get a loan if you're making a lot of money, and you don't need it. When businesses really need some help because they're struggling, maybe part of downtown has gone through some physical changes and they found that it's harder for people to get to their business now, or they're less popular for some reason or another and they just need to get through a rough patch. Perhaps that might be a more productive program to address the idea of maintaining businesses that have been around for a while, have been part of the fabric of the community. And I think underneath this, I'm not sure what it is we're really trying to accomplish. Is it we're trying to maintain or improve vibrancy, or are we trying to improve our tax revenue? Because if we're trying to improve our tax revenue, I wouldn't want to exclude national chains, although I'm not in favor of bringing national chains in. That would certainly increase our economic revenue. I don't think they're likely to come here because, as we've heard, or I've heard over the last 12 plus years, large national chains don't want to come to a place like Highland Park because we don't have access from the east, any serious access from the east. So you're not going to see big national chains for the most part. Regional businesses, I don't know if those constitute national chains as we're going to define that. I don't know how I feel about regional businesses. To some extent, Ballyhoo is a regional business, and I think they'll be successful. So perhaps there's room to attract that, and we should be careful on how we define what a national business is. So those are some of my areas of discomfort. I don't really need to get into the rest of them. I do want to say that the discussion here has been productive. I think what people have had to say is easy to interpret by staff if the program goes forward, to tailor it in a way that would make it successful.
Thank you. Andres? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just one point of clarity. So the national applicants is specific to if I'll just take Starbucks, for example, wants to relocate because they're looking for all their stores to have drive-throughs. So that would be a national tenant in our community looking to relocate in our community. So that's an example of one relocating in the community, not necessarily attraction from outside the community.
So again, with respect to my main point is, what are we looking for, vibrancy or tax revenue?
Yeah.
I don't want another Starbucks personally. I have nothing against Starbucks. We have several. But if Starbucks sees a huge money-making opportunity because they can go into a place where they can put a drive-through, my understanding is that they generate millions of dollars of revenue every year. And money is money, so to speak. And our business as a city is to have enough money to have successful city services. We have a great fire department, we have an excellent police department, we have a great development department, we have all kinds of services that we're able to afford. We have high property values. So that's why this is a bit dicey for me.
Thank you. Andres?
Yeah, I want to address several things that were brought up. I think philosophically, I do believe this is a return on investment play and not bailing out people in trouble play. As much as we want to be compassionate, and I think during COVID, that was important. That was a worldwide crisis and everybody was suffering. But, some restaurants are run well, some are mediocre in how they run operations, some are poorly run. So I really don't want to be in the business of bailing anybody out, despite how much it might hurt us if they're not going to make it. So I really do believe that there are some strong restaurants here that could be stronger, and I think that's the purpose, right? Or we want to attract certain types of restaurants that would fill something that our residents want. And the other thing too is, in terms of survival, there's plenty of restaurants in Highland Park that survived the pandemic and survived the downturn and survived the social unrest, right? And they made it through, and that tells us something about how well they were run and all that. So I'm comfortable with that. I think that in terms of moving up the threshold, like to 200, which I was kind of leaning in that direction originally, but the more we move up the threshold, the fewer slots we'll have for restaurants. So I rather do more restaurants and help more with something that is still very meaningful and substantial. So I feel comfortable with capping it at 150. And then, and I think right now strategically we are focused on restaurants. We can't. We worry about retail. We worry about other kinds of businesses that could be good for the community. I don't think we can try to tackle everything all at once. I like our focus. Our focus on Second Street, that's very focused, right? Our focus on restaurants, right? And then let's see how this goes. And then that'll give us a sense, because more restaurants may mean spillover effect on some other types of businesses that become more attractive. So we don't know what the consequences of investing in restaurants are, but we know our residents want it, and I think that's a good strategic play on our part. And then in terms of, it is a play for more revenue. I would triage this. I think revenue, we'll get more tax revenue, but that's not the major reason we're doing this, because the logic would be, well, let's help Starbucks, right? They're going to bring us more tax revenue. I think the big play is vibrancy and what our residents are looking for. I think our play is we love our businesses, and the ones that are successful and could do better, we want to see how they can expand and fulfill their dreams that will then also be helpful for our community. And those are the two main reasons. And then as a residual benefit is like, if they do better, we'll get more money. But the amount of money we get from it is not the big play. It's the vibrancy and the support of the businesses that have committed themselves to Highland Park.
Thank you. Tony and then Yumi?
I want to respond to that a little bit. If it's not the revenue and it's not about the money, I want to pick up on that, because we've talked about investment. My understanding is the amount of money that we are investing versus the annual revenue, I'm not talking about the tax revenue, but the annual revenue of these businesses, is that these loans and these grants really can't be repaid for years. So when we talk about investment, I'm assuming you're not talking about economics, that we're going to get back in tax revenue what's going out. And that's a concern for me. And I also, I want to pick up on the restaurant issue again. None of us are retailers. To me, I think that needs to be left to the economy and economic forces. My feeling is that diversity is critical in the long term. Restaurants may be popular now, residents may be looking for restaurants now, but in terms of the long-term economic health and vibrancy of our community, don't we want a greater diversity of businesses in our downtown? And if we can get that by expanding the program beyond just restaurants, why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah, great question. Okay. Yeah.
Just to respond, two items. The return on investment is the combination, that we invest some funds, yes, for some revenue that comes to increased tax sales, but it's an investment in creating more vibrancy. It's an investment in sort of creating more retention with the restaurants and more attraction and all the things that come with that, right? So that, I have a broad definition of return on investment, not just a specific economic one.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
assuming you meant, but my concern is vibrancy alone as a goal can be dangerous. There are communities around us that are especially vibrant, but can't sustain certain city services.
Right.
And I don't want to lose sight of what our fundamental purpose is as a municipality. We're not a bank, we're not a lending institution, and we're not a capitalist development institution. And I think that has to be kept in mind. I've said a lot, I understand that the preferences for the program, and I'm not
Yeah.
going to try to talk anybody out of that, but I want to make sure we keep track of these issues.
And I would say that the financial part, I think we all agreed is very important. I think we're going to be judicious, and I think we'll benefit economically as well as in these other ways. And just one other thing on the helping other forms of business. I agree with that. I believe in a diverse ecosystem. But from a strategy perspective, I've learned that you can't tackle too many things all at once, or else you dilute the focus, you dilute the funds, you dilute the attention, and the change management has to go with it. I think we're picking a spot here on restaurants, we evaluate what happens, and then we keep evaluating the other parts of our economy and see what else may need support or other things like that, so.
Great. Yumi wanted to comment, and then
Thank
we have
you.
one more slide. And I do want to kind of wrap up by 7 so that we can have dinner before our meeting.
This may sound, well, certainly it's not heresy to say this, but, I mean, if there was a new national chain or something that we wanted, I would hope we've opened the door to it, that we wouldn't, I mean, as to your point about being sort of broad in our approach. And I guess, I was gonna say this at the beginning of the conversation, but it still holds true, that, I mean, when the city manager said that the next step would be voting on this, I personally am not comfortable voting on this yet. This is too big in terms of a new approach, too much money involved, too many complexities to it. I think this deserves more discussion, and I would certainly look to the input that we get at the April 17th meeting, when we have all these restaurant owners, and I assume other retail owners will attend it as well. I'd love to get more input from them. And I even dare say there are experts in our community that are, you know, developers that may have, you know, love and investment in this, of the city, who would be willing to help us. And I personally am comfortable with staff spending a little more time on this, and I would also support hiring additional staff, at least for this project. I agree with the two council members who talked about getting more diversity. I do not think that this program should be limited to restaurants. I realize that there was a poll taken that the interpretation of it was that more restaurants are wanted by residents, but I think polls are open to interpretation, and I'm pretty sure residents would like other types of businesses as well here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Should we go to the next slide?
Aaron, can Aaron say something?
Oh, Aaron,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
to the microphone there, so. Thank you, you know I'm chomping at the bit. I just, before we recap the last slide, I just wanted to address the request to up the budget cap from 500,000 to the full 1.5, like to fully redirect those funds, and why we would suggest not doing that, at least in its full, not just because of maintaining the different paperwork for it. I'm not as concerned about that. I'm looking at this as the boutique incentive was designed to be a 1, 2, 3 year grant tops. we're looking at this as a more long-term. This is a year over year. We're not gonna have every restaurateur in town say, this is the year I'm going to reinvest. I would rather we have something that's sustainable for us to be able to budget year over year, to keep this going and to be able to grow it over time. I don't like the expression to split the baby, but to split the baby, 750,000, 800,000, I think that's something that's more manageable. Similar to the exterior grant, not everyone's going to be maximizing every time they hit it. We've already seen that in the first few exterior grants that we've had come through. So I do think you're going to be able to help a heck of a lot of restaurants, existing and new, by keeping it in $500,000 to $800,000 range in year one. I think that really helps us be fiscally responsible. So I'm trying to hit all the core priorities with this to really strategize for long term. It also gives us a little cushion if later in the year we do decide, hey, we do need to expand this now in something similar to retailers or other businesses that we're targeting. Our focus, as you know, was on restaurants with this, but there's certainly room to grow. I just would hate to see us maximize and max out our budget and have nowhere to grow with this and not be able to be sustainable.
Great point.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well argued.
Thank you. And I'll, since Carolyn sat down, I'll put on your last slide of policy feedback. I see she's switched with me. So, Mayor, these are the final points we're looking for. Do you want to allow this grant loan program to go for both existing and new sales tax generating? And I know you're working on the definitions for sit-down restaurants and other food and beverage businesses. Again, to kind of address some of that fear and the risk, making sure that the people who are obtaining these grants or loans, these incentives, have that minimum 3 years experience owning and operating other restaurants, that the sit-down or table service restaurant operator generates a minimum of 1.2 million gross annual sales for a minimum of 3 years. So it's not just, hey, we had one great year, but we're consistently hitting that mark. And similar with the food and beverage business that's not table service, having a minimum of 600,000 gross annual sales for at least 3 years. And then again, we'd like to see at least a 5-year minimum term on a lease.
Okay.
And then, sorry, we forgot to include in there the clawback. So we heard from a couple of people, the clawback, 180, 60, 40. That seemed at least 2 people supported that.
I can go with it.
Yeah, I can go with that.
I
Okay.
think that's,
Yeah.
and is it possible, wasn't there the one slide where you had a list of different things
If
that
you
were
could
the
use it
criteria?
for,
Because like,
What they can use it for.
like the maximum sales and that and the use.
Eligible and not eligible improvements? Is that what
The
you're saying?
improvements, or I think you're talking about the
The painting, carpet.
Well, I wanted both, actually,
Yeah.
because the one in front of it, so application requirements was
The
one,
eligibility.
Okay.
and then.
Sorry, this is like
right,
slow going with my
It's okay.
There we go.
And then the
This one.
eligible and ineligible, but I don't know if we'll get to that tonight,
I
and
don't think we
maybe,
will.
the
So,
good news is that I like that suggestion about listening to restaurant owners too.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, can you go to the last one?
Yeah, I
again?
asked Ashley to do it, 'cause
Yeah,
this is like-
sorry, because it's so slow.
it's going really slow
Thank
tonight.
you. So Kim had her hand up, and then,
We'll go around
or do you
again.
want to just do each one and,
I was just gonna say yes to.
Yeah, I'm
to
saying
all.
yes to.
yes to all?
Yes to all. I
Yes
like
to
these
all?
criteria. I think this is the way that we figure out which restaurants are gonna make it potentially.
Okay,
So-
yes to all?
Yes to all.
Okay. Tony?
Yes to all,
You mean-
with my
Yeah,
qualifications.
yeah.
Just not-
With
not-
due respect.
Yes to all, but
Yeah,
not
we have
all.
to move to
I
the
guess
next.
my only one is, a minimum of 600. I don't have a sense of, which businesses are, at that threshold.
Right.
And that's my only question mark.
Can we just trust staff that they've done the research?
Thank you, I was just going to
I-
say
I-
that.
And they got the data from
But that's
the
based
restaurants
off
and
of
the
a
state.
point.
Yeah,
And after the,
IOR and the averaging.
Right.
Okay.
yeah, because I asked that too.
and we'll certainly get feedback. We're having a meeting with restaurants on the 17th, so we'll get their
Okay,
feedback
sure.
and bring that
Thank
back
you.
as well.
One other quick comment on the sustainability point that Erin mentioned. The loan component, can that be a revolving loan fund? So as funds come back in, we can be giving them back out?
So we talked about that, Councilmember Tapia and I. We do not recommend it. So I mean, the way that we budget every year. I mean, we certainly do have funds. We don't recommend establishing a separate fund specifically for this program. Yeah, I know Julie's eyes are already raising about, we've got more funds than most other municipalities. It's just something, every year, the council, as you approve the budget, you would have an opportunity to say, how much are we putting in for exterior grants? How much are we putting in for this program? And then it's, in that sense, we're
trying to
revisiting.
make it more complicated, so,
Thank
sorry.
All right, and then last, yeah.
Just one other point, because I know we're not gonna get to
You're
those others,
also
just
last.
also to Aaron's, point about how much money. So, actually, I think that going with the million, even though we put the 1.5 million aside, again, it's because I think we can divide that up in terms of 10 businesses, maybe whatever it is. It's just a rounder number that I think works. So I actually could see going down to the 1 million. I really still think we need to kind of go big or go home, and that's why I don't want to go down below that. But I can live with that, because I still think we're making a huge commitment to existing and new businesses.
Yeah, and I would agree that 1 million is a statement. 750,000 is like, well, it just kind of, actually, that was the Barack Obama problem. He asked for 1.3, he said, well, okay, 800, and then was enough. So, and then the other thing too is, we had budgeted 1.5 million in grants, if I'm not mistaken. This is 1.5 or 1 million, if we go to 1 million, in loan and grant combination, so we're actually drawing less from the budget in terms of, some of it will be replenished through the loan repayment.
Well, but you do, I mean, but when you spend it, when you give it out, it hits the budget the same as a grant.
Loan or
They hit
grant.
the,
Right.
they hit the budget the same,
Because it's money out.
money out.
Okay.
Okay, which we'll get back, just the asterisk. We'll get some
Right,
of
but
it
you
back.
won't get it back in
Right.
that budget. year.
It's an expense for the year.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Right.
And then it becomes income the following
Different,
year.
yeah.
The-
Well,
the-
over the
repayment.
term of the loan.
Well,
so
right,
it could
right,
be
right.
10 years.
Yeah,
or whatever.
okay, I got it.
So what questions remain unanswered for you?
How many people want to
Because we really don't get one.
How many people, want to go up to 1 million versus staying at whatever the numbers were?
500.
500.
1 million.
1 million.
I would do it.
You would what?
I'm saying yes, I would,
To 1
a
million?
million.
Okay, you're not, I know that. You're not?
No.
Oh, I don't know what I'm doing.
Go for it, Nancy.
I mean,
Right.
Be bold.
but my sense from Aaron is that the staff recommendation is not to go to 1 million, right?
Correct. Our recommendation would be to stay, I mean, I'm not surprised that we asked for more for the council, because you're a generous council and you want to make a statement. I do think $500,000 is a statement. I think 750 is a statement. But, we defer to council's decision.
I mean, we could make a statement of 1 million, but just understanding that we'll revisit with you. I mean, so
That's
just
fine.
because we say 1 million doesn't mean
That it's
for
going
the
to be a
public,
million,
we're gonna
right.
spend it in the next.
I
Absolutely.
kind of want a 500,000 as sort of a stopgap, and then how are we doing before, with the caveat that if things are going great, we could go to 1 million, but I'm not comfortable just going 1 million right out of the gate. Tony?
I was just gonna say, I wanted to clarify, I'm not opposed to the million because I'm opposed to the program. I understand the program's going forward. I think it's a good idea to have it as a stopper, at least preliminarily. If it's a great program and things go very well, you might consider raising that in future years. But I think as a starting point, it makes a good statement.
It's a pilot.
It's not overreaching, it's not exorbitant, which I think 1 million has potential to have that reaction.
And I appreciate your statement of, then we have room to grow. But right now, you're just kind of right out of the gate. I don't know. I think I'm gonna stick, well, now here we are at,
I like Peter's point, but I like Peter's point too, that we announce it as 1 million, but at a 500,000, we really take a hard look at it if we need to pull it back.
Aren't we the stopgap? I mean, it's not like that's gonna just go out the door.
Right, well, that's a
Right.
good point.
so stopgap at a half.
Well,
See where we're going, and if things are going
I
well,
was-
then
I was-
another half is available, and if things
I-
are,
Yeah.
honest to goodness, if things are not going well, then it's like, oh, but we've already committed to another half, that's twice as much.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean,
Okay,
But I think there's something, and there's also the message you send to the public, right? That we're willing to spend up to $1 million if the program justifies itself. And we will monitor this responsibly at the halfway mark, see how it's going.
Okay, so.
If we get applications, right out of the bat for $500,000, we have to sort of wait because we want to see how those things are producing
Right.
and how it's working
Do we
before
want
we
to,
continue.
do we want to report back after 1 quarter or 2 quarters? What do you recommend? Where is that, or is it just when we hit $500,000, that's when we say, okay, and then how long do we have to assess, to figure out what's your process?
What about
What's the
when we get
measurement
250?
versus success?
Right. What is success?
Yeah, what is success?
Well, as a loan, if we're giving out, for example, a $100,000 loan to someone, they have to make interest payments. If they miss a single payment, that tells me we have a little
But you can't assess that
immediately.
anytime soon. I think I'm gonna just say sure to half, and I'll see you next year.
Say that again.
I'm going up to $500,000, and we can reassess next year and see if this is something that could go to $1 million with a step.
700 or 8.
Preliminarily, this is a funding issue. So if we start at $500,000, we can examine at a given point chronologically as to whether our funds are being heavily used.
Right.
I don't think you're gonna know if it's a successful program for at least a year.
Right?
And,
At
and
least.
that's too late to make a determination as to whether to
To
go
add
up to $1
another.
million. So I would say, let's check after 2 quarters and see how much of these funds are being, how popular is the program?
Exactly.
I think that's the base
And,
you
and
wanna know.
Julie has said many a time, you can amend the budget.
Right,
Can always go up, it's hard to come down from a public.
yes.
I'm with you, so I'm with the $500,000 cap.
Oh, I mean, can we compromise with what the staff has recommended?
What were you looking-
750.
750.
Oh, fine, sure.
Okay.
We'll come back anyway, just to make sure that we're all on the same page in the after.
Do
the
we
restaurant
need to
day.
have further conversation, though, to Yumi's point? You seem to, there were a lot of and you raised some great questions.
Well, thank you for saying that, I appreciate that.
So I kind of feel like we need further conversation before we say something.
This is, these are large sums of money we're talking about. Yeah,
So we'll come back after the restaurant meeting in April,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
have more clarity,
Thank you.
hopefully, in terms of how this is being received theoretically and what people's feedback is. Okay,
And we'll work on some of the definitions.
appreciate that, thank you. So we don't have closed session, right? So we can just adjourn this?
Yes.
So,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh,
Goodness, that was so much.
That was awesome.
Yeah, yesterday.